The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. Bringing you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
Losing to UCLA, I don't even think was the worst thing that Franklin had to deal with. It was the conversations after he landed back in State College.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Brian, you and I wanted to start with this because losing to Oregon and then losing to UCLA, the worst part about all of this might be that Franklin might lose the team.
Look, there's this expectation that this was the year. You lose Oregon, overtime game, it is what it is, but everything's still in front of you. Losing to UCLA, now you're on that cusp. You may not even make the playoff. Like, that is hard to fathom, going from a team that was almost ranked number one to, wait a minute, we're close. We lose one more game. We're 9-3. We're on the cusp of not being. That can cause some problems. So it's usually one of two directions. Everybody just dials in and you're good. Or even if it's just a handful of guys, if they're out, like if they're not giving everything in prep during the week and all that, that can sour a roster real quick. It only takes 4 or 5 guys and it can go south. How does that work? And here's the other part, and I'm not picking on them. Northwestern is next. Zach, are you excited to cover Northwestern? I mean, honestly, are you really excited to cover Northwestern?
The game that I'm looking forward to, if Penn State beats Northwestern in Iowa, is the Ohio State game.
Right. You know,
that's the end of that. Supposedly we would think that's the end of the season on the line there. That's the complete end.
But if you're not ready for just talking about players, and coaches know this, if you're not getting better against Northwestern and Iowa, what are your chances to even come close to beating Ohio State?
Oh, no, but for the entertainment and the what if factor, Ohio State is still presumably on the table.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And Ohio State better not take Penn State lightly either. That's why college football is the greatest sport on earth. Mm-hmm. There's so many emotional roller coasters. Trying to be even keel as a fan is nearly impossible, but it is interesting. And here's the thing. This week will be the hardest week for Franklin and his staff to coach. Even if they were undefeated, trying to get Penn State players ready to play Northwestern is like banging your head on a wall. That is what I call a helmet game for all the wrong reasons. Not because you're excited about the other team's helmet, it's because you don't respect it that much. I don't care if they threaten to cut their hands off. It's going to be hard. Losing to UCLA, and they were as flat as a 20-year-old Coke. They just cannot get going. They finally do, and they're down 17, 20 points or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. That's got to be hard on you. So again, does that motivate you? Because they looked motivated in the second half, like they played with their pants on fire, and they should have. But now does that carry over when you didn't quite complete the comeback? I don't know. This was the most weird upset since 1985 in college football. I mean, it's weird. I don't know if there's any lecture that even Paterno could have gave in his prime that would pull that team out of that funk. So from that, it's interesting. And then here's the other part. There's buy-in and all that. And I'm sure that, behind closed doors, you'll never hear this publicly. The AD, other people in the athletic department, is their job. What's the pulse of the roster? Are we going to lose anybody, et cetera? In the portal era, that's possible. I don't think that's the case because I think Penn State's culture has been really, really good. Mm-hmm. But they weren't ready for UCLA, so you have to at least have it on your radar. That's just part of it. And it's, again, this is the part of the dynamic of college football that makes it more unique than anything else. It's not like the NFL. Well, I'm mad at the head coach, but I'm under contract. It doesn't work that way in college. So the contract, the NIL, they can get around, and the kid weeps. So many little snippets right there, man. It's really fascinating.
So we'll get to your perspective on what those conversations behind closed doors look like with Pat Kraft and anybody that's, really high up that, has some influence or a lot of influence on the program. Let me respond to a couple of things that you said, because obviously everything stood out, but the things that one, Franklin looks defeated. Brian, I don't know if you watched a lot or any of the press conference or snippets of it, but he just looks defeated. From the way that the discourse has been online, and I know that I don't think that James Franklin lives online, but somehow he does. He is always aware of what the media is saying and what the feedback is and what the comments are. So whether that is brought to his attention by the people that help him in the communications department, or it's James Franklin saying, let me scroll through everything. What's my news feed look like? He seems defeated. So something was said or a conversation was had that he didn't like. He says the team is still bought in, but the way that he is acting and the way that he is having his most recent press conference leads me to believe otherwise. As far as the team dynamic goes, I would like to think that most people are at least going to stay bought in, but it is the energy factor. What is the energy level? Because this is a senior-laden team. So you say, is there going to be a roster fallout this offseason with the transfer portal and everything like that? The team's already going to turn over as it is. Drew Aller's going to the NFL, both running backs, a majority of the offensive line, a majority of the defensive line, a majority of the secondary. All those guys are going to the NFL. So there's going to be roster turnover as it is. And you said how this is different between NFL contracts and NIL payments. NIL payments are paid up front. Like, they already got their due. So there is no financial incentive because it's, well, I already got paid. And I'm not saying Penn State is like, yep, we're checked out because we already got our paychecks, but it's just kind of the subconscious thing where there's no financial incentive because you got your payment as far as we're all concerned here. Now let's pivot to Pat Kraft and James Franklin and what those conversations, it was definitely a quiet plane ride, but after everyone landed in State College, how do you think that conversation went down between Franklin and Kraft?
They may have had it at different points on the ride or anything else, who knows, but afterwards they got to reassess, why did we get here? It's really bare bones stuff. It's like a business. We had expectations for this profit margin. We're not remotely hitting it. What happened? You got to check every detail, because the players were as far away from being ready for that game as possible. That does not fit Penn State. You can bemoan his record in big games all you want, and it's legitimate. One thing they don't do is lose to teams like this. They just don't. And they looked completely apathetic, like they had no interest in the game of football.
They still do. At least Franklin does.
Yeah, like I saw some video of him right after the game. It looked like he had been stunned. Like I'm not trying to pick on anybody in this situation because I've been there too. Like he'd just been in a car crash. Like he was in a daze. He didn't look like it was a surreal moment. It looked like it was beyond that. So I don't know what Mr. Kraft or anybody else can tell him or get from him right after, but I imagine late Sunday into Monday, there had to be some kind of conversations. And to be honest, if you're Franklin, he's got to ask his staff, okay, did anybody see this coming? They got to have that conversation as a staff before he can really tell Kraft. Yeah. You got to know all the answers on that. Whether or not they're truthful is important, and I don't know those guys, but that's a pretty high-paid staff. I would imagine somebody saw something. Correct me if I'm wrong. James had a comment that they didn't take the loss to Oregon well. So it had to have been at least on his mind, because that is a telltale sign that practice is going to be quote-unquote iffy. And then you get some later in the week, you're like, oh boy, I like the game plan, but are they going to execute it? At some point it's on the players to get out of the fog. That makes me question the leadership. And it makes me question whether they realize that, hey, football is an every game situation. You don't just show up. It's all the way through the week. And you got a veteran team. You got a veteran coaching staff. Mm-hmm. None of it makes sense mathematically or logically. So there's a lot of questions he probably had to ask first before he even got to Kraft. And I doubt Kraft liked any of his answers anyway, because he's going to take crap because, I don't know how many people know this, but the press conference that James Franklin's getting fired ain't coming. He's owed $50 million or something like that. I just don't see it. This is not Texas A&M where there's oil money sprouting out of the ground everywhere. They're not going to look to be that way. They're probably going to be more judicious, I would imagine, unless he leaves on his own accord, which is possible. I don't think James Franklin's going anywhere.
That's a perfect segue to discuss all of that, because fans they're angry. The people that have been calling for this move for a long time are like, yep, now it's due. It's going to happen. And now the people that are joining that crowd are saying, okay, when's it going to happen? there is a strong chance that none of this happens because Penn State is in a tough spot to make this kind of decision.
Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k or properties or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. Canceling those all can save you money every month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL.
Fernando Mendoza coming back to Autzen Stadium. In 2023, with the California Golden Bears in a Pac-12 matchup, RIP, Mendoza came to town on a wet day. By the way, some rain in the forecast, but it never rains at Autzen Stadium, as we know. And it didn't go very well for Mr. Mendoza. He turned the ball over a couple times. Cal's offense struggled. Cal's defense struggled even more. This Indiana team is not that. He is definitely a better version of himself than he was at Cal, where he was a solid quarterback, and Oregon's defense that I don't think was as good 2 years ago as it is right now really made life difficult for him. That all fundamentally started, think back to the interception in the red zone or strip sack or anything like that. It all started up front. And again, I go back to what I mentioned earlier. The reason I feel pretty confident about Oregon going into this spot is that Iowa's defensive line pushed around Indiana's offensive line. And that was a big difference in the game. Now, Indiana ended up winning because they're better and Iowa can't play offense. Anybody think Oregon can't play offense? No. And what's the best unit on Oregon's defense? The defensive line that just had its best game of the year against Penn State. They stopped the run and they stopped the pass. They were good situationally. They did everything that you could have possibly wanted. That was on the road. Now they're going to have Autzen behind them. It's a daytime kickoff. I think that part stinks because the Rutgers game is going to be a day game as well. I hope Autzen has at least a couple night games this year. Like the USC game, please be at night. That should be a night game. It's a different look, different vibe, different feel. But here's on each side of the ball, the groups I think that get tested the most. So let me start with the secondary for Oregon here. I love this secondary. It's hard to not. I thought I might like them this year and we might see some mistake. Nope. Coaching staff has been really good. They're getting a serious test this week. Serious test. If you rank the Big Ten quarterbacks right now, Fernando Mendoza is well above Drew Aller. Their passing game, Joel Klatt was critical of the way their receivers played against UCLA, and the receivers, of course, didn't do anything against this Oregon secondary. This group of Ducks DBs is going to get their biggest test of the year. Not just in Elijah Surratt, but really the system that Indiana runs. A lot of RPO, which is something Mendoza's familiar with going back to his time at Cal. He ran a bunch of RPOs. He's very good at them, and he makes a lot of really good reads. He makes a lot of really good throws. And I think the best play that Indiana runs consistently, the one that they torched Illinois with time and again, is what you'd call a glance route or a post or a skinny post. There's all different sorts of verbiage and whatnot, but that's what Oregon's DBs, I think, need to be prepared for, because this Indiana team can run the ball. We'll hear more about their ground game later this week from Goins when he gets on the show. But Elijah Surratt is the best individual wide receiver that Oregon has seen this year, by far. He would be the number one guy at Penn State, and I don't need to tell you that he'd be the number one guy on any of Oregon's first four opponents. It's not particularly close. Elijah Surratt is an NFL receiver who is a big-bodied guy that can catch the ball at all three levels, does everything really well. He's really dangerous in these RPO situations, and that's going to be a legit test for Oregon secondary. I'm curious to see how they defend it, because Do you want to have your defense really key in on stopping the run and set up those one-on-ones? Or do you want him to drop back? Or I'm interested to see how the tactical strategy works out there for Dan Lanning. But the secondary, no doubt, because of Mendoza's ability to not just do that. I'm not saying that's all he does. He's not a one-trick pony back there. He can make a lot of throws on the field. But that, I think, is when Indiana's been the most explosive. They run the ball. They bring up the linebackers on the RPO. They run the glance route behind, and they hit it for a big play. So that's when they've been particularly dangerous, throwing the ball over the middle of the field. Kind of reminds me of the San Francisco 49ers offense in a way. That's going to be a big-time test for the secondary. And then on the other side, the reason they dominated Illinois was the defensive line. Luke Altmaier was running for his life. The Hoosiers held Illinois to 2 rushing yards. That included sack yardage, but again, 2 rushing yards. Indiana also ran for 320 in that game. 2 rushing yards. The defensive line is good. Kurt Cignetti's a really good head coach. I think by the way, his comments this week are what we're going to call the anti-Mike Gundy, just giving Oregon absolutely positively no fuel. And we'll see how Dan Lanning motivates his guys this week. Hopefully we get to learn, because that means Oregon wins. Obviously no Ducks versus them when Oregon loses. But Cignetti's offense has been really impressive over the last couple of seasons. And so I think that's what most people think of when they visualize Indiana football having success. This defense is good. This defense has got some guys. Like, if you just go watch them on film, and I think they're impressive, particularly up front. That's how they controlled the game. It's how any defense wants to control the game, is at the line of scrimmage. So here's another test for Oregon's offensive line, which passed with flying colors against Penn State. And as a test for the secondary against Penn State, again, more than passing grades, exemplary performances in that matchup. That's going to be required again. So I'm most interested to watch those two groups to see, hey, when you've got Elijah Surratt and a good couple of receivers, how does the secondary match up? When you've got a legit NFL guy over there and a good quarterback as well, who could also be an NFL quarterback, according to some. Not me, but some. And on the other side, how does that offensive line hold up, again, against a legit front four? Can they run the ball like they did against Penn State? Are they protecting Dante Moore? Interested to see how all that stuff plays out. But those are the biggest tests I think Oregon will get this weekend. So, speaking of the game, got another SSA here from Brutus's dad. SSA, I assume that's a dog name? With the forecast of 55 and raining, the Ducks will dominate the ground game both offensively and defensively due to better trench play. I feel better about Oregon's play up front on both sides because of the last games that these teams played. Now, sometimes trends reverse themselves in games, but boy, I've been impressed with the offensive line. I love the defensive line. Dominate the ground game. I mean, let's define dominant. Let's say 100 yards or more, they outgain them. So Indiana runs for 140, Oregon goes for 240. I don't think that's inconceivable. I think it's going to be harder to run for 140 than it will be to hold them to 140 on the ground in that statistical hypothetical. So I'm going to put that at 5.5. 5.5. Because again, I do feel good about what Oregon will bring to the table up front. But yeah, if it is wet, ball control and protecting it will be at a premium. But yeah, if it comes to, I think there are a lot of different ways that Oregon go about beating you. And though I know Indiana's a really good team, I do think Oregon is better.
The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for the weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however I like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
Texas did nothing well against Florida.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, Your team every day.
I want to move on, and we will move on and turn our attention to OU starting tomorrow. But the sour taste from what happened Saturday in the Swamp still lingers a few days later. And one post-game show just isn't enough to talk about everything that went wrong for the Longhorns in that game. So we've got to flush out a little bit more, and we've got to continue the autopsy of that 29-21 SEC opening loss in Gainesville. Apologies for my voice, coming off a bit of a cold. Also did some yelling at the TV on Saturday. Also spent some time at Austin City Limits Music Festival over the weekend. That trifecta, not a good combination for having a good voice. So apologies, and appreciate y'all bearing with me. All right, diving back in. We started with the defense during Saturday's postgame, so let's start with the offense today, and we'll get to special teams as well because they're not out of the woods either. We'll talk about them in a minute. But starting with the offense first. The offensive line was and is so unbelievably bad. And I say unbelievably because it really does feel unbelievable that an offensive line comprised of a 5-star right tackle, a 5-star right guard, a 4th-year center who has appeared in more than 40 collegiate games, 3 different left guards, and a 4-star left tackle who's in year 3 can play this bad. Like, that's where we're at right now. All of the talent that Texas has brought in, and I think most Longhorn fans, and I think a lot of college football people around the country would have told you that Kyle Flood is one of the top offensive line coaches in America coming into this year. The combination of talent and what you thought you had from a coaching standpoint, and this is the offensive line that you get through 5 games. Again, almost unbelievable how bad it is. And it's usually pretty hard to find statistics for offensive line play. But when you're as bad as Texas's O-line was against Florida, you could find them. Arch Manning was pressured 35 times on Saturday. That's the most times a quarterback has been pressured in the Steve Sarkisian era by a mile. The previous high was 28. That was set in the Longhorns' loss to Georgia at DKR last season. And we all remember, we'd like to forget, Texas's offensive line got destroyed in that game. Only, air quotes, 28 pressures in that one against Georgia, 35 in this game in the Swamp. Somehow it was worse than that debacle against the Dogs. Now, some of the pressures fall on Arch Manning. There's no doubt. He's not absolved of all blame here. But the majority of them fall on this completely inept offensive line and also on a coaching staff that didn't really adjust to its coaching staff, to its offensive line getting continuously whipped. That's a problem. Saturday's offensive line performance gave me something that I've never seen before in my 31 years of life. According to Pro Football Focus, Connor Stroh, who started the game at left guard for the Longhorns, had a pass blocking grade of 48.8. I've seen that before, but that's bad. And it was so bad that Stroh got benched late in the first half. He actually came back in for a couple of plays in the second quarter, but he got benched permanently at halftime, and he did not play in the second half. Here's what I haven't seen. His replacement, Nick Brooks, had a pass blocking grade of 0.0. I didn't even know that was possible. I don't know how that's possible. 0.0. The pass blocking grade, I should say, for the true freshman Nick Brooks, who was recruited as a tackle. I have no idea why he was even playing left guard, and I have less of an idea why they left him out there at left guard when he looked completely incompetent. He wasn't great run blocking either. He also committed a couple of penalties, so it was a lot of bad from Nick Brooks everywhere, but a 0.0 pass blocking grade. It's like he didn't even turn in the assignment. How do you get a 0? I had never seen that before, and I hope to never see it again, at least for a team that I root for. The Texas left guard position, that combination of Connor Stroh and Nick Brooks, it was responsible for allowing 45% of Arch Manning's pressures. It's also according to Pro Football Focus. So again, 35 total pressures. The left guards responsible for 45% of those 35. It's about 16. So 16 pressures allowed by one singular position on the offensive line. That almost sounds made up. It's so bad. If you watch the game, though, I don't know if it does sound made up because the left guard was getting beat on every single play, regardless of who was out there in the burnt orange and white. So bad. And look, the rest of the offensive line didn't fare much better in pass protection either. We mentioned in the postgame that Florida, there's no T in there. Florida entered Saturday's game with 6 sacks. Florida entered Saturday's game with 3 sacks on the season. They had 6 sacks on Saturday. I can't even read my own notes right now. Florida had 3 sacks on the year in their first 4 games of the season. They had 6 sacks in Saturday's game alone. Horrible. And for as bad as all of that was, the pass blocking may have actually been better than the run blocking. The Texas running backs combined for 15 yards for the game. Like, that would be a bad drive on the ground for some teams. For this team, that was an entire 60-minute football game. 3 running backs combined for 15 yards. Trey Wisner had 11. Ryan Niblett had 4. Christian Clark had 0 on 11 combined carries. It's 1.3 yards per clip from the tailbacks. Inexcusably bad. Doesn't make any sense that it can be that bad. Another stat on the offensive line. I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that the last running back attempt to go for 20 yards or more came from Jarrett Gibson in the Longhorns' first-round playoff game against Clemson last year. There's now been 186 running back rushes since then. Texas does not have a single running back carry that's gone for more than 20 yards. In that time frame, they only have 2 running back attempts that have gone for more than 15 yards. So it's not like they've had a bunch of 18s and 19s that just haven't quite gotten to 20. Now, they've only had 2 get more than 15. They've had 0 get over 20. A running game performing this poorly in year 5 of the same coaching staff. Sark's been here. Kyle Flood's been here the whole time. The fact that the run game is this bad in year 5 is inexcusable. And again, some of these problems date back to last year. And the Longhorns, 5 losses in the last 2 seasons. 3 last year, 2 so far already in 2025. 95 rush attempts for 302 yards. That's 3.17 yards per rush, only 60.4 yards per game. You can't do that against good teams and expect to win. I don't even know if Florida's a good team. Georgia and Ohio State, those were your other 4 losses. Okay. I mean, you can't do that against them. Clearly, you lost all those games, but you could stomach that maybe a little bit more than you can against Florida. But Florida, 1-3, you're doing that. Not good. Not quite preseason number 1 numbers, I would say. Some of that falls on the backs with Trey Wisner and C.J. Baxter both banged up. Texas may have the worst running back room in the SEC right now, which is stunning. But most of this falls on the offensive line. There are no running lanes ever. Some more stats from the offense, and these are not Florida game only stats. These are season-long stats. And the Longhorns have played 5 games. It's nearly 42% of the regular season that's in the books. So we've got a pretty good sample size here. And keep in mind, these numbers include San Jose State, UTEP, and Sam Houston, the 3 worst teams that the Longhorns will see all season long. Congrats, Kentucky. I think you're better than those 3. Here are some season-long numbers for Texas. The Longhorns are 108th in 4th down conversion percentage. They are 109th in red zone efficiency, 116th in 3rd down conversion percentage, 127th in penalty yards per game, 131st in penalties per game. There's only 136 teams in FBS college football. Insane. Now, the penalty numbers are all inclusive, so some of the blame for those fall on the defense and the special teams, but most of them have been on the offense. The O-line had 6 penalties, accepted penalties on Saturday. Ryan Wingo had another false start. How does a wide receiver have 2 false starts in 5 games? You should never have a false start as a wide receiver. Wingo has 2 of them. How is any of this possible? What happened? I know the offense had to replace 8 starters from last year, so we figured there would be some growing pains, right? But these aren't growing pains. This team isn't growing. They are shrinking like an old person or like something else when you go into a swimming pool. Shout out George Costanza and my Seinfeld fans out there. There's shrinkage going on with this Texas offense, and they're going backwards. They're shrinking even more. And oh, by the way, the schedule doesn't get any easier. OU may have the best defense in the conference. maybe the best defense in the country. You still have Georgia on the schedule. A&M's defense looks like it's turned a corner. I mean, if it weren't for the ghost of Sam Houston, these Texas offensive numbers would be even more pathetic, and they still are pathetic. And that side of the ball has been an unmitigated disaster through the first 5 games. The O-line is awful. People want the quarterback benched. You don't have a running back with more than 155 yards this season. Played 5 games. Your leading running back has 155 yards. Arch Manning's your leading rusher with 160 yards. Remember that streak of 1,000-yard runners that Steve Sarkisian has? You can kiss that goodbye already. It's all so bad. They are running out of time to fix it before it's too late.